people, morning, evening, good afternoon. I don't know when you're watching this video, but I am filming this at the crack of dawn because that's the only time that I can get peace and quiet in this house. So let's just move forward. I ain't even eat my breakfast yet, so I'm very cranky. You understand? So let me just smile. Be grateful to be here and get the ball rolling. Welcome to this new episode of Trini Trent TV, where we talk about pop music and popular culture. We talk about the songs, the hits, the albums, the eras, and of course the artists that we love, the ones that help to define our lives as fans of just the culture of popular music and entertainment. And one of those artists is none other than my girl, Miss Mariah Carey. So what I'm going to be doing in this episode is reflecting on Mariah's career. Now, this month of June in 2020 is actually the 30th anniversary of her career. 3 whole decades. Some of y'all won't even have thought at this point. You weren't even born yet. I was alive, even though I look very young. So what I'm going to do is split this up into bite-sized pieces. We're going to have a 5-episode series. Oh, good, my hand looking real white in the sun, boy. We're going to have a 5-episode series in which we look at the different eras and different issues in her career. In this first episode, what we're going to be talking about is her entry into the music industry, her initial impact, and of course, we're going to be looking at the different issues that she faced during that debut era. That's 1990 to about 1992. That's how I'll define it. And of course, we're going to look back on some of the songs and hits that really defined that time in her career. Stuff that you, if you're a younger fan, you can go back and discover. And if you're an older person like myself, even though I don't look it, an older person like myself, we can go back and rediscover why we fell in love with this artist in the first place. Now, when Mariah first came out back in 1990, I was actually too young to have a very clear memory. I was still an infant. As a matter of fact, my earliest memory of Mariah was in 1993. That's when she had the Music Box era and she had dropped the Hero video. And that video used to play over and over and over and over. I wasn't really a fan. Let's just say it was not for me. I mean, even Mariah already liked that song. But I got into the song into her music deeply around 1995. It was really Daydream era. That's when I became really a fan. And I started to go back and really get more into her. And as I got older, by the late 90s into the early 2000s, when I started to save my own little school money and I could go and buy music, and of course the internet came around and we got access to more information, that was when I really started to discover Mariah's impact on the music industry. You see, when Mariah came out in 1990, this is where we start the impact point. You understand? Cute little cue card if there's one. This was back in 1990 when Mariah first came out with Vision of Love. Mariah really helped to revive singing on the pop charts. She really helped to bring singing back to the forefront of popular music. You see, back in the early 90s, at that turn of the 80s into the 90s, music had become very beat-driven. American pop music had become very beat-driven. It had become very word and lyric-driven. And that's because we saw niche genres like hip-hop, which was very much associated with Black people and in a specific region, New York. It started to bleed over into the general American psyche. And we saw so many elements of hip-hop and even the style and culture of hip-hop starting to dominate pop radio and popular culture. So what we saw at this time, vocally driven artists, especially Black vocally driven artists, did not have a lot of prominence. They didn't get a lot of airplay on popular radio and pop radio. In fact, they were relegated a lot to urban radio, which is in American pop music. It's code for Black. We saw a lot of them, basically segregated and put into the box of urban or Black radio. So people like Patti LaBelle, Lisa Fisher, Anita Baker, they weren't, even Sade, weren't getting a lot of heavy airplay on popular radio. The only Black singer who was really holding it down and continuing to win, because even at this point, Tina Turner, Donna Summer, they were becoming more legacy artists, and Michael had jumped into that very hard, aggressive, lyric and beat-driven style as well in pop music. The only one who was really holding it down for the singers was Whitney Houston. She was one of the few, I should say, I shouldn't say the only one. She was one of the few vocalists, Black vocalists, who was still out there carrying the torch for the vocalists. So what Mariah did with Vision of Love and what she did with that first album is that she helped to revive singing on popular radio. She made it cool to sing again because Vision of Love came out and she was doing all of these fast little runs, these little rips moving through her transitions between her registers with such speed, precision. I mean, the way that she did these songs on that first album, Vision of Love, Alone in Love, Vanishing, Love Takes Time, I Don't Wanna Cry, Sent From Up Above, All in Your Mind. I could do the whole track list. The way she put together this entire album and the way that she delivered it vocally was that she put a focus on singing again. And she really made it popular. And for many younger artists who were coming up after her, like we saw in the late 90s with Beyonce, Christina Aguilera, even in the 2000s, 2010s with the Kelly Clarksons and the Ariana Grandes, they really looked at that song, especially Vision of Love, and that album, her self-titled debut, as the benchmark. It really became the standard for what they wanted to do as singers. Even artists in her time were looking at that album. Darcy Pipe on in the kitchen, ignore it. People who were looking at that album as a source of inspiration. I mean, we look at Celine Dion. That's one of Mariah's peers, one of her contemporaries. And Celine Dion's second English album, I think it was her self-titled album in 1992. If you listen to that album, you hear Mariah all over it. It might as well have been a Mariah Carey album because you can hear the impact that Mariah was having on her singing style. So Mariah got a lot of praise. Mariah got a lot of attention. And it was especially because when Mariah came out in 1990, she came in the industry fresh on the heels of a scandal. I mean, we looked at Milli Vanilli. And this was an R&B, a black R&B duo. I think they were out of Germany. And they used to perform a lot of American pop music. And it was discovered that they actually weren't performing it. They were doing the dance moves, the little Bobby Brown two steps, but they actually weren't singing the songs. They were lip syncing over somebody else's records. The scandal actually hit the airways when they had performed in concert and the track started to skip. And then people started to wonder, wait, they paid money to come to your concert and you're lip syncing. Now that's actually a common thing. But what really came to the conversation was when their manager admitted they actually never sang the song. They weren't lip syncing to their vocals. They were lip syncing to somebody else's vocals. And they had actually won the Best New Artist Grammy in 1990. So the Grammys actually had to rescind their Grammy award. They had a whole press conference where they gave back the Grammy and they apologized and everything. And that brought a lot of shame on the industry. That made a lot of people question concert ticket holders, decided to question going to concert. You had people questioning buying music. There was a lot of distrust because people felt that they had been duped. You understand? So when Mariah came around in 1990 and she came to the forefront and with this vocal ability, people were really engaged and they were paying close attention because they really wanted to know who was this girl who was singing like this. And she helped to bring a lot of prestige back to the Grammy Awards. I mean, in 1991, she won the Best New Artist Grammy. And with that, she really helped to bring a focus on artistry and singing and songwriting because she also wrote her music. She helped to bring that back to the Grammy Awards. She helped to bring that energy back to the music scene. But that came with a great deal of scrutiny. You see, at the end of the day, Mariah, there's a fly that keeps touching me. At the end of the day, Mariah was not a very big touring artist. She actually did not like to tour. She was afraid of touring. She was very nervous about being on stage. She had horrible stage fright and she used to avoid it at all costs. So what used to happen back then is that people had a lot of questions. Why is this girl not going on tour? Because that was especially a popular thing back then. Janet Jackson, Madonna, even Whitney, these were touring artists. When you liked a song and you like an artist, you would watch them perform on Soul Train and then you would go off and see them on tour. You would buy the music and you want to hear them sing the song that you just bought. Because they didn't have the internet where they could just go and watch these people over and over. The only way you got to see your artist was on TV. You hear them on the radio. I don't know who just flushed the toilet. And of course, you get to hear them when you see them live. But of course, she had different reasons as well. Like when she appeared on Video Soul on BET back in 1990. I think the host name is Donnie Simpson. She actually said the reason she didn't want to tour with her first album is because she wanted to build her catalog. She wanted to write the second album, put that out, and get everything out to the forefront. However, that led to a lot of scrutiny. People were upset. Ignore the talking in the background. People were upset. And what that led to was a lot of comparison to Whitney Houston, and in a very unfavorable way. You see, Whitney Houston was touring. Whitney Houston was appearing live, and people got to associate the voice with the face and the whole package. But they couldn't do that with Mariah. So then people in the press started to really frame the conversation. Now, I honestly believe there was some behind the scenes tinkering on both marketing teams, because it made sense sometimes to pair them up and put them against each other. However, because it will draw attention and get a lot of people focused on both artists. However, it wasn't always favorable for Mariah, because Whitney was the one who was on the road and Mariah was just staying in the studio and doing the occasional interview and television performance. And of course, Mariah had worked with a lot of the same producers of Whitney. Mariah did not get to produce on her first album. Even though she had the talent, they didn't give her the opportunity. So although she wrote the songs and she sang the songs, she didn't produce them. And we had people like Narada Michael Walden, Walter Afanasieff. They had worked with Whitney before. And of course, you just look at the whole frame of it. You have these two very svelte, beautiful, stunningly beautiful women who had these huge voices that you don't normally associate with that style and that package. That type of voice you associate with an Aretha Franklin, with a Patti LaBelle, those big soul singers. And I don't mean big as in body. I mean, that big, over-the-top kind of performer, as opposed to somebody who looks like a supermodel. And this conversation really bled over into people thinking that Mariah was just too good to be true. Issue number 3. People started to think that, listen, she's just an industry product. She's just somebody out here who is benefiting a lot from our dollars, but she's not really a genuine artist. And it really became problematic when she got into a relationship with Tommy Mottola. Around late 91, early 92, a lot of conversation came out that Mariah was involved with Tommy Mottola. And people started to say, oh, well, she do a tour. She's not really genuine as an artist. And she's not as good as Whitney. And look, she dating the boss. And that's the only reason why she has a record deal. And as I said, Mariah didn't really get to control a lot of her music. She didn't have the creative freedom. This was a big issue for her. Issue number 4. She did not get to control her sound all the time. Yes, she got to write her music and she wasn't forced to cover anybody else's song. She made sure to have that in her contract. But she could not produce the records. And it really created a lot of frustration. In fact, some of the songs that we heard on her debut album were on her demo tape that she gave to Tommy, and that's what got her signed. But they were changed and altered from the versions that she had enjoyed and that she felt were more organic. For instance, she hates Someday. She notoriously hates that song. That was a huge #1 song for her. But she hates it because she felt that they had made it so... At the time, it gave it kind of a dated feel with all the different New Jack Swing elements, and it took away the sparseness that made that record so fun for her. But you see, what was really going on, and this is the biggest issue, issue number 5. What was really, oh, they can see my hand? Issue number 5. What was really happening to with Mariah as part of the marketing and because of how she looked? What was going on at Sony, and this was from her mouth, not mine, was that they really started to market her without emphasizing who she was as a person. In other words, they didn't put a lot of emphasis on her race. They didn't put a lot of emphasis on her identity as a multiracial person. And that caused a lot of friction for Mariah. Just looking at the way that the music was tailored, Mariah felt like, for instance, in her Genius interview in 2018, when she put out the Caution album, she spoke to, I think his name is Rob Markman, and she spoke to Rob about that first demo tape, and she had a song on it called Hypnotize, but the label refused to put that on the album because they felt it was too R&B. In other words, that's code for saying too black. And she had to really assert her racial identity through her music and in very clever ways. So, for instance, we saw the transition from the first album into Emotions. What she did on Emotions was that she started to work with a lot of other female singers as background singers. She started to bring that choir and gospel elements into the music, so many soul elements into the music. And of course, she also had to make very bold assertions of her race through the media. I mean, early on, there was a lot of conversation about who's this girl, is she white, is she black, and there was a lot of negative press. So she actually held a press conference back in the early stages of her career. I think it was in 1990. And she sat all the R&B press down, all the black reporters down, and she said, this is who I am. This is my identity. She even did a very popular, that cover, a real big muffler boy. She even did a very popular magazine cover with Jet magazine, where the cover story read, Mariah tells us why she looks white but sings black. And that's because a lot of people honestly thought that this was a white girl. And in many cases, Mariah had to explain her race over and over and over. And this was an issue for her. As a matter of fact, she did it in several interviews. And I have one here on a notepad. I don't have an iPad. COVID budget. So notepad. In Vibe magazine, 1998, I think it was Danielle Smith who did this piece. I like to give people their credit now. In Vibe magazine, she said, "I'm mixed. That's what it is. If you want me to define it, I can only say my father is African American and Venezuelan. My mother is white, Irish from the Midwest. So I'm a mixture of these things. I'm not in denial of either of them. Anybody who's mixed knows they're of the black race." So what she was trying to say is that she wasn't trying to hide, or trying to put on my notepad very covertly now. She wasn't trying to hide her race. But at the same time, she wasn't afraid of saying she was a multiracial person. And that caused problems, even though she wanted people to know that she was of black heritage, and that was something the label did not emphasize. At the same time, she was trying to let people know I'm mixed. And that in itself caused issues for people, especially to this day. People have issues with the concept of you can be a multiracial person and be black and white, especially in the American conversation. Because in a post-colonial experience, you have to pick one. And if you don't pick one, that means you're denying one or the other. And the issues of race still continue for Mariah. She still continues to come to terms with it as a person and as an artist. And in a press junket for ABC, I think this was in 2019 at the Embrace Your Ish launch of Mixed Ish, she actually said this, back to my notepad: "Music has always been my escapism. So writing about it," she's talking about her racial experience, "has been very healthy. But it is almost like I needed to validate my existence, because I didn't feel like I was good enough to exist." That is a lot. That is really giving us a glimpse of who this person is. She continues to have to face all of these issues, these recurring conversations about who she is as an artist, who she is as a singer, who she is as a songwriter, who she is as a human being. And she doesn't even understand that she has the value and the worth to exist on this earth. She has a right. So I just said a whole lot. The video went way longer than I expected, but that's just my style. Roll with it. So let's take a look back at some of the songs that I think really defined the start of Mariah's career. Songs that if you're a new fan, you can go back and discover. And if you're an older fan, as I said earlier, you can rediscover why you fell in love with her and the music in the first place. One song, I have to point out, is the song that started it all, "Vision of Love." If you have not heard that song, if you don't know that song front to back, you need to get into it. It is really the song that set the bar for other artists, but of course for Mariah, it knocked the door open and introduced us to this amazing singer. The second song I highly suggest is "If It's Over." That's an amazing ballad that she actually wrote with Carole King for the Emotions album in 1991. Initially, Carole King really wanted Mariah to do a cover of "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," which is a song that she did for Aretha Franklin. However, Mariah didn't want to do it because she didn't want to be compared to one of her favorite artists. And the version of that song that I highly suggest is the live version, not on the Grammys in 92. That's the one that the Lambs love to share. I actually prefer, my favorite version of the song, I should say, is the one on Saturday Night Live in 1991. Because we got the full song and she performed it with the SNL band, and it has this really organic, raw feel. Of course, she was in that leather jacket. She came out to sing that night. That is the version of the song I highly suggest. And the third song that I highly suggest that you listen to, of course, would be, I would say Till the End of Time. Till the End of Time, also off of the Emotions album. It really, for me, is this large and live stadium torch kind of ballad. It really took Mariah from sounding like a young new artist singing in a studio to sounding like somebody who could sing on stage in an arena. All right, the sun is out in full force and now I'm starting to melt. So I have to go. Thank you for watching this episode of Trini Trent TV. What I want you to do right now is share this video. Share it with all your friends. If you're a lamb, share it with the lambs. If you're just a casual music fan and you want to share it with other people, do that too. Share this video and join the conversation. Join the conversation. Get the ball rolling. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane with Mariah. In the next episode, we're going to be looking at the era of experimentation. I just giving you all a little tease. The era of experimentation. Anyway, it's time for me to go before I melt into the floor. Thank you so much. I can hear people waking up. I'll check on you next time. Later.